And who's your favorite, you have to say?
My favorite?
Mine is Whitney.
I don't know. I hated this whole season.
Hi, this is Caitlin.
And this is Sharon.
And welcome to Real Housewives on Real Housewives, where we unravel housewives' story threads and keep the tea flowing.
So chic.
Hold on to your carry-ons.
This episode, we're digging into Ultimate Girls Trip Season 3, which just wrapped last week.
Ooh, we're very on top of things for once.
Yeah.
It takes place in Phuket, Thailand, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and tell us the cast?
Yeah, so there was Portia Williams from Atlanta, Marisol Patton from Miami, Alexia Echevarria from Miami, Giselle Bryant, Potomac, Candace Dillard Bassett, Potomac, Whitney Rose, Salt Lake City, Heather Gay, Salt Lake City, Leah McSweeney, New York City.
When we read them, it kind of sounds like when you're doing like the Oscars or the Academy Awards. You know, it's like the name and like what movie they were in.
Yeah.
Okay, and the concierge, Pepsi, which is the first time I've loved Pepsi.
I know.
My Coke joke for everyone. But he was great. I mean, he was the nicest human being, and he was funny. He made the trip, honestly.
I hope he got like paid
I
extra
hope so too.
or
Yeah,
some kind of
on the Actors
something.
Guild pay roster now. He should be. So I felt like finally we got a cast of strong women.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the trip was just somebody whining.
Yeah.
And that was a nice change of pace.
This season was my favorite out of the three.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I felt like nobody overshadowed or no one completely led. There was some back and forth at least. Random thoughts from the episode is that I want one of those spirit houses that they kind of gave the offerings to. I thought those were so cool. And then Thailand has the prettiest Sprinter vans I've ever seen.
They do. And you know what? When I was looking at it, I was like, those look so pretty. And it kind of reminded me of a Las Vegas casino.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know.
I can kind of see that.
Like
I don't know
in a pretty way.
Yes.
Like in a I like it way. But it was
in that like
over
self-contained way.
Exactly. It was like a mini casino on wheels.
That's awesome. Well, that makes them even cooler now. All right, our feuds. So we're going to split this into 2 episodes. Our feuds are going to be Heather versus Whitney, which is, I feel like we just did that on Salt Lake City.
Yeah. Well, we try not to be redundant.
Yeah, exactly. Heather versus Leah. Whitney versus Alexa and Marisol. Portia versus Leah and Candace. And Giselle versus the Casa Azul thief, or essentially Candace, kind of.
But is it?
Yeah, but is it? Question mark. But that's who she thinks it. So for this episode, we're going to focus on Heather. So we'll focus on Heather versus Whitney and Heather versus Leah. Mm-hmm. But first, we've always been starting with the Bailey Q since the first Ultimate Girls Trip. Mm-hmm. So that was where Cynthia Bailey layered out her like kind of shady awards for the cast. And we're going to do that with this cast.
What we would choose.
Exactly.
Okay. Sexiest.
I said Whitney.
Portia. But I was debating Whitney.
Yeah. I think we both switched them essentially for... we'll see.
Pettiest.
Heather.
Giselle.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Heather is good.
Yeah.
Smartest.
I had a really hard time with this one. I said Candace.
I said Heather.
Yeah, I could see that too. I just didn't want to admit it, probably.
Prettiest.
So I said Portia, so I'm guessing you said Whitney.
No, actually, I said Candace, and it was weird because I think pretty. Portia and Whitney maybe like objectively, but there was something about Candace's face that was so interesting. I couldn't stop looking at her.
Pretty. Mm-hmm.
Okay, shadiest.
Giselle,
that's who I had.
I mean, she's self-proclaimed shadiest.
Best, but
Portia.
Whitney.
That's true.
Most fashionable.
Wait, you missed sweetest.
Oh, sweetest.
I had one, then I erased it. I said Whitney. I actually think
so
she's
did I.
The kindest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then most fashionable.
I said, okay, I thought about this like the whole time I was watching, trying to decide who to pick. I went with Marisol because I felt like, you know how French women have that sort of classic vibe where everything they wear just kind of is like tailored well and fits well.
Yeah.
It's not like the patterns weren't crazy, but she was just always really put together. So I went with Marisol.
Interesting choice. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
I put question marks because there's really no one that stood out to me.
That was the problem. I really couldn't decide.
What stood out to me was I didn't like a lot of Leah's looks, which made me sad.
Me too.
So.
Yeah. I saw online that someone said, who is it that was dating Kanye? Julia Fox, I think. You know, she had all those like weird jean cutout outfits. And someone was like, oh, Leah's just trying to channel that. And she kind of was, because that weird cutout jean bikini top with the bottom. And like every pair of pants she had was open in a very weird location. Like it was either the thighs, but not all the way down to the bottom. Like I don't understand what her inspiration was. It was so distracting.
It was.
I almost couldn't focus on anything she said because of the outfit. Also, like, Candace had this, like, everything had to be big this trip. Like, that hat reminded me on Friends, Rachel wears that hat on the bus. And Candace's hat, it was like you could fit, like, you can fit the whole cast under the giant hat. Its name was Janet, though. I liked that.
That's cute.
But also, so she is known for her little napkin triangles. She always folds these little, like, Kleenexes and then dabs her eyes every time she cries. But it was like a paper airplane on this. Yes. What was that?
That was awesome.
You couldn't fold it 4 more times to be like.
Well, then it'd be too thick. She really needs to get under the lower lashes.
It's like I wanted to just take a paper airplane and be like, yeah, that works. All right, let's start with really the first one right out of the gate, which is Heather versus Leah. So it's a discussion about sobriety. The main issue is that Heather talks to the ladies about getting Leah drunk, even though she's sober. And I guess the first question is, like, do you think that Heather was being serious?
See, I wasn't sure. At first, I thought maybe she was joking and it was just in poor taste.
Yeah.
But then everyone else seemed to take it really seriously, and she never said to Leah, I was joking, I'm sorry, that was a stupid joke.
And I kind of wonder if she didn't think the cameras picked up her discussion with Leah, because when she first got there, she said to Leah, like, how are you going to stay sober with this group? Yeah. And I feel like I need to support you. Like, I'll be there for you. But it was kind of quiet and to the side. And it's almost like, well, you can't say that and then go say to the other ladies, let's get Leah drunk. And like Portia was like, well, she doesn't drink. And Heather was like, well, that's the challenge, Portia. Yeah. I was like, well, that's.
Because that part there, I thought she was joking. But later on, her excuse was, well, I have sober, quote unquote, sober friends that I funnel drinks to because they asked me to. So that was making it sound like she was being serious.
And that's terrible.
That is terrible.
It's like, what a great friend you are. Gee, I'm not going to try to lose weight around her. She'll just be like funneling me cookies.
Funneling Swedish fish into your mouth.
And like the other thing I didn't get is when Leah was like, well, if you'd read my book, you would know this was a huge thing. Like, I think she was writing Heather off at first as like, it's not a problem because she doesn't know my history. And then Heather's like, oh, I read your book.
Yeah.
And if you've read Leah's book, which we're going to for a later book club, you do see that that's a huge discussion, is her sobriety and all the trouble she's had with drugs and alcohol. So when she kind of says, like, Heather wants me to relapse on this trip for her own entertainment, I thought, well, that's a little harsh. But at the same time, if Heather read the book and then she ignores Leah's issues, it is kind of crappy.
I kind of think maybe she did just want some drama entertainment.
Do you think she actually read Leah's book? She must have.
She said she did, but maybe she just didn't want to say no.
Yeah, maybe not.
No, I didn't read your book. Did you read mine?
Yeah, exactly. That's true. She's probably like, I've read everybody's book like 4 times. Go read my book. Do you think the rest of the group was supportive of Leah's sobriety?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who won?
Leah.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Heather doesn't have a
Heather
sober
never
leg to stand on. Sober leg to stand on. No, Heather never wins. Maybe that's why she's so bitter about things. But that's kind of her shtick, too.
Yeah, her sarcasm.
But even, I think it's Giselle who's like, I just don't believe half of whatever comes out of Heather's mouth.
Yeah.
And I thought that's an interesting lens to take back to looking at Salt Lake City in general. Like, can we not trust? I mean, we're sort of trusting that what people are telling us in the interviews are true. We've learned that may not be true with Jen Shaw. So now are we also learning that may not be true with Heather? Because that would make everything that you hear from her questionable.
Yeah. When Giselle said that, it actually had a big effect on me because she's, as far as I know, she didn't really have any beef going into this with Heather. So the fact that she felt that
and saw that so quickly
really might be significant.
Yeah, I kind of think so. Okay, let's charge into Heather versus Whitney. So This is a continuation of their issues on season 3, especially considering the fact that we learn that it's pretty much 2 days after Jen Shah's sentencing that Heather packs up and flies to Thailand. So they've just wrapped the show, and the bigger thing is that they have not done the reunion. Mm-hmm. In my head, when I was watching this at first, I didn't understand that. I thought they'd done the reunion, and I kind of thought that Heather and Whitney, I'm like, oh, they're actually not in that bad of a place, so maybe next season will be great. And then I remembered, no, we're going to have to contend with the whole reunion, and they drag all this stuff up
because the reunion was not a good
it was not
place
and
for them.
It makes the fact that Heather seems to think that they're not friends at the reunion an even bigger problem based on kind of what we'll talk about here. Like, so what's interesting is it starts with Whitney kind of questioning Heather's resolve to leave the Mormon church. So Heather's book, Bad Mormon, is coming out, and Whitney is sort of like, well, I left the church. Where are you in that process? Sort of asks that. But she also just kind of says you aren't leaving the church.
Yeah. So what it boils down to is Heather, writes this book about leaving the church. She's obviously not a regular churchgoer.
Yeah, she's a bad Mormon.
Yeah. I'm sure they're not too happy with her.
Yeah.
But there are these roles that your name is on, and you have to have it removed.
Yeah.
And you have to go through a process in writing or legally something. And Heather has not had her name removed. Yeah. And on season 3, they showed Whitney having her name removed, which is really like that final step, that final cutting the cord.
And Heather kind of argues it's not a big deal. It's just a list or whatever. But then Whitney said, which really struck me, but they use that to count when they lobby for bills, when they build a new temple and lands they acquire, they count their number of members. So they don't necessarily want you off their rosters.
Right. Yeah, because if they go to a politician, they're like, hey, we have this whole congregation backing us on XYZ.
Exactly. And Heather's name's on that list. It's problematic. So that I like that she explained that, because I too was a little bit like, yeah, she's on the membership. But, I don't know.
And the other thing, I found it aggressive that said, so Heather said, I believe on the season, she didn't want to get off because her parents, she didn't want to hurt them, I think.
Yeah, she said, I think she thought it would make less waves with her family if Heather just stayed on the roster.
Which, why would they even have to know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I agree. Actually, that's a good point.
I found it odd that she said on the girls' trip, well, I don't want to be aggressive about it.
But you shared all the secrets in your book.
It's like your book was aggressive. And not, I mean, I liked her book a lot. But her book didn't.
It didn't just gloss over things. It explained in detail Mormon secrets.
Yeah, and problems.
So,
that was surprising to me. So I did get this feeling that she
was more
wouldn't do that last thing for some reason.
Yeah, I did too. I got that feeling.
It would be better if she just admitted it. You know what? Because her whole thing is about how her journey through leaving the church. She'd be like, this is part of my journey. I did all this. I believe all this. Why can't I do this last thing?
Yeah, I got this far, and that's as far as I got. Yeah, but it was almost like she flipped it on Whitney and was like, well, why would you even ask me? Like, why point it out? Like, what are you doing to point it out? And it's like, well, maybe she was trying to understand. And also, I'm sure she was trying to point it out, because that's kind of how the show works. Like, and they just had a season, and they both had a lot of unanswered questions with each other. So when they came into this, they're still upset about everything. So then the other thing that they get into is that Whitney's kind of like, well, Heather's not telling the truth, and the black eye comes up. So like, oh gosh, we have to talk about this.
We won't go into it all again.
I just felt like a weight come down on me when I said that. So Heather gets a black eye on this trip in Salt Lake this season. Nobody knows where the black eye came from. Did Jen do it? Did whatever? We don't know. So they finally kind of talk about it. And Whitney actually says, thank you, Heather. This is the first time you gave me any scenarios about what could have happened. So Heather says her 2 theories are that an overhanging cabinet hit her eye. As I'm reading them, I'm like, Heather is a liar. Or there was an elbow in her eye when they were like roughhousing because they were drinking and kind of like goofing off around at the pool and stuff. And I really got to the point last season where I felt like Heather didn't know what happened. I didn't really think she was covering anything up. When they're on the boat and they're talking about this with all the other girls, it feels a little sketchier.
It does.
Heather's had more time to think. And then what really feels sketchy is they go into, I think they're playing like Truth or Dare, but it's like if you don't tell the truth, the dare is that you have to eat, was it a cricket or a
scorpion or something?
It was a scorpion. That's why it's worse than a cricket. They're like, can these kill us? Yeah, maybe a cricket would have been nicer. And they just had to tell the truth. And they ask Heather, do you know what happened or how you got your black eye? And Heather just eats the scorpion. And it's like, if you didn't know, you could have said, guys, I told you there's 2 options. I don't know which one happened. Or the truth is, I don't know what happened. And you had kind of said, well, maybe she just didn't want to bring it all up again.
And maybe they're like, eat the scorpion.
Yeah. But then they were all kind of joking about Jen, and she got kind of like, she just didn't want to say, I don't know. Giselle was sure that Jen did it.
Yeah. Well, Giselle was also sure Candace stole her.
I guess Giselle just is real strong in her beliefs. But I like Giselle more than I like Heather. So I was like, well, if Giselle said she did it.
And she did it, clearly. But one thing that interested me about the group's reaction to Whitney and Heather, they were like, they couldn't understand because the Mormon culture is so different.
Yes, that was interesting.
I think it was Portia or somebody. She's like, what the heck? Just don't go to church.
Yeah.
They're sitting here arguing about going to church, not going to church. And I
laughed
laughed so hard.
I thought other churches were worse or something.
Because it's just it's so different.
Yeah. They did seem like at a loss over this argument. It's like, okay, you guys, enough. But I don't know. I left it feeling like Heather did know what happened and she'd been lying about it the whole time.
And why was she so against Whitney showing the pictures?
That was mean. She was like, if you show the pictures, then we're no longer friends. And like, again, she kept putting all these restrictions on Whitney. Like, she just tries to keep Whitney from being who Whitney is, kind of. And I hate that about Heather.
And if the black eye was an accident, why would you care if she showed the pictures?
Yeah. I mean, then you would just say, oh my gosh, yeah, we got a
it
real
was bad.
shiner. It was bad. Like, yeah, I don't understand. It's almost like she's trying to pick a fight. And they kind of pinky swear made up. And they had another moment where here's the problem. On the camera, they made up and they were really nice. Yeah. Then you went to the behind the scene things and they were both a little catty, especially Heather, who was kind of like, well, this only means a tiny, tiny bit.
Okay, I didn't see the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. Well, you saw some of the camera. I mean, some of the talking heads.
Oh, the talking heads. I thought you meant there was something else.
Yeah, there was. Okay. So there was an interesting thing they did this time that they've never done before. There were Roku extended scenes. So that you only saw if you had a Roku and you had to hit it really fast.
That's what I
That was the problem. I had a Roku, but I had to hit it really fast. Most of them didn't mean a whole lot. We may clue you into a couple of them in the next episode. But Heather often said, well, this is just a starting point. We're going to have a lot more I'm sorry's and forgiveness to give. It just felt like, I guess maybe knowing what we know about the reunion, she hadn't forgiven Whitney. And then it almost made that feel even faker. And it sucks because they were nice moments.
I really believed in the trip. Well,
I did
too. I was
too.
like, what happened? Because I really believed that they were happy, that they were hugging for so long.
Yeah.
And then, but I knew what happened at the reunion.
So I think you can't help but like think ahead to the negative stuff. Like it kind of ruins the moments.
Is it just like a feeling when you're in a special place? Like kind of like when you're on The Bachelor, you fall in love because you're on this beautiful island and then you come back and you're like, I don't like you.
What it was. You know, there was that feather that floated down that they felt was all Forrest Gumpy. Like it was beautiful. So yeah, I think, and maybe they were just tired of fighting. They'd spent a whole season and they thought, But then the fact that none of that carried over to the reunion of Salt Lake City shocks me. I don't understand that at all. So who do you think won, Heather or Whitney?
I almost feel like Heather thinks she won. But
in a way, I think she did because, again, she gets to control the narrative. Like, she gets to decide when there's been enough sorries. She gets to decide what Whitney's punishment is. She gets to decide.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I don't think that Whitney wins because I think Whitney would just like to maybe not even brush under the rug, but just be done with it. Like, how many times can you talk about it? Like, there's a point at which Heather's just going to have to say, I'm not happy about how this happened, but I'm not going to get it resolved. You don't often get the resolve in a way that you want. You just either get a sorry or you don't. You kind of have to choose whether you're going to accept it or not. Instead of going, well, we need to have so many more sorries. Like, okay, that's a kind of exhausting.
We need like 5 more trips to Thailand.
She's like, maybe she was hoping they'd get their own show. Like,
which she probably is.
Whitney and Heather resolve their issues in Brazil or somewhere beautiful.
Heather said that Whitney was just doing it because Justin lost his job and she needed to be on the show.
I thought that was kind of a crappy thing to say.
I don't believe that because she has storylines.
I know. And I was proud of Whitney for saying, like, I reached a point where I was making more than Justin made. Like, good for her. But yeah, I think that's unfair. I didn't like how much this season kind of like showed behind the curtain about how people might fake a story or kind of change things so that they get more airtime. I'm sure that happens. But like as a viewer, you don't really want to know that or see that. And Bravo usually shields us from that. And I feel like they really didn't here. They were kind of like, well, this is your behind the scenes, or maybe because Peacock was in charge, not Bravo. They kept joking about that. I don't know.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but then at the same time, maybe Heather's not doing that for the show. That she's doing that anyway because she's just manipulative.
That may
like
be
she
true.
would have changed the whole scenario
To be about her no matter what.
Yeah.
I could see that. And like I think Whitney, again, I don't think Whitney's that manipulative because the stuff always comes out when she gets really drunk and is not in control of herself. So it's like, I think if she was in charge of it, she would set it up better.
Oh, she would.
And she would win sometimes. She usually doesn't win. So I think like that argument from Heather, like, it's so silly. Like, well, Whitney cares about all this stuff. And she said, it's like, no, I'm not buying that. Sorry. Not just because I like Whitney better. But.
Yeah. Heather did lose the confessional look because Caitlin texted me and texted me there's that like dress and it's got like I don't know, fluffy stuff. It looked to me like a gift bag.
And it was so
the paper that comes out of a gift bag.
And then it was like splattered like a...
And tell them what he wrote.
Well, I was tired of Leah talking about all of her period stuff constantly. And I was like, is Heather wearing Leah's old period pads? Sorry, that's gross, guys. But that was... Like, that just came to me at one point, and then I couldn't unsee it. Now, you can't unsee it either. Sorry. Oh, you know what I forgot to ask you is, who hadn't you seen before on the trip? Maybe we could end with that, because that'll kind of take us into the next episode.
I had not seen Portia, Marisol, Alexia, Giselle, Candace.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen most of them.
So for me, I'd seen everybody, and I did know Marisol and Alexia, although I have not seen the rebooted Miami. I had seen the 8 years ago Miami, but they were both on it, so I felt okay. And then Portia, I was actually telling your husband, has really grown as a person. Like, she was so calm and centered. It was like the narrator almost of this trip. It was like what I wish Dorinda had done instead of taking control.
Yeah.
It's like they kind of let Portia narrate. Like, she was a little bit on the outside and she got to kind of explain what was going on. That's what they should have done in season 2 that they didn't do. So,
and she was hilarious.
She was so funny. All right. Well, we will come back next week with the second half of Ultimate Girls Trip season 3. But until then, remember, housewives bring the drama.
But we bring the receipts.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to help support us, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. Also, visit us on Instagram and Twitter, both at RH_on_RH for fun pictures and polls, or email us at rhonrhpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again, and remember to stay out of the shade.